you on this 10th study circle meeting of the Sales Tax Practitioner Association on the very controversial topic of Section 6.2 under the CST Act, which we commonly known as a sales in transit. So for that matter, we have with us a very able person, Mr. C. Rajat Talati. Before I go further, I request our President Pankaj Parekh to say a few words. Pankaj bhai.
C. Rajat Talati, Honorary Secretary Shashank Dond, Ashit Shah, Convener of Study Circle, my colleague in the Managing Committee, seniors in the profession, and dear members. Very warm good afternoon to everybody. We all are aware that the Central Sales Tax Act 1956 very short enactment as compared to MVAT Act 2002. However, nowadays more litigations are attracted in respect of sales by transfer of documents of title to goods under Section 3B and its exemption under Section 6.2 of the CST Act 1956. Now most of the assessing officers dispute the sale in transit transaction in case of a pre-existing order. The sales tax authorities make the objection that since the goods were already earmarked for original purchaser before putting the goods in transport, the exempted sales as a sales in transit cannot be allowed. They interpret ANG Project and Technologies versus State of Karnataka 19 VST 239 Supreme Court in a different way. Recently, Honorable MSTT also pronounced judgment in case of Ajay Trading Company in favor of the dealer after considering various settled judgments. However, we face many practical difficulties during the course of assessment proceedings. So to understand the difficulties and to understand how to resolve those difficulties, we invited our past president and senior member C.A. Rajat Talati. So friends, let us hear him. Before he starts his talk, he has to perform one important task of releasing referencer for the year 2014-15. This year, we had decided to distribute referencer by 1st July 2014, and accordingly, Dharmen Shah and Vivekanand Rao, both are the joint conveners of referencer, worked very hard. So, it was very tough task, but they completed their duty before predetermined date. I congratulate both of them, and I request them to come near dais and hand over the copies of referencer to Rajat Talati for releasing the same. And I also request Sri Rajat Bhai to release the same. Thank you.
Request today's speaker to take the charge of the session. Let me introduce before all of you, though he doesn't require a present introduction because he's a very well-known personality, as you have said, that he is our past president of Sales Tax Practitioner Association. But for the benefit of the other members, let me just introduce briefly. He is a chartered accountant by profession and also a bachelor of law. That is, but he is practicing as a chartered accountant from 1986. He was an associated editor of the Sales Tax Review published by our association for the 2 years, 1996 and 1997-1998. He was a co-author of the publication A Guide to VAT Audit published by the WRC of our Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He has co-authored a book titled Study Material on Sales Tax Law in the Maharashtra for the Beginners, which I think many of you are using that books for the beginners of the sales tax. He was the honorary joint secretary of All India Federation of Tax Practitioner West Zone for the 3 years, that is from 1997 to 1999. and he has delivered number of lectures and delivered papers throughout the whole over the Maharashtra as well as the India. And with this brief introduction, I welcome Mr. Rajat Talati. I request all of you to carry it with loud applause. As a token of our love and affection, I request Pankaj Bhai to offer him a flower of bouquet and a memento. Rajat Bhai. And now I request Rajat Bhai to please task. The two contributors, rather the conveners for the referencer, Mr. Rao and Dharmen, require special compliments. I request them to come over here and accept our gratitude. Outside, I must thank the association for giving me this opportunity to study the subject so that I can come before you and share whatever I have studied and re-studied again and again. My task has been made very simple when the president said, and he made a sort of he created a background under which this lecture is arranged. Section 6(2) of the CST Act. I would not say it has a checkered history because that word is reserved for works contract. It has a litigative history, and since the transaction earns exemption from the Central Sales Tax Act, it is always the endeavor of the traders in particular to try and fit into the conditions under which this exemption is granted, and that attraction at times lead them into litigation because the revenue's attitude has been always to disallow such claims. Now in this background, we have also to consider various decisions which have been pronounced since 1955, if I were to say. Now what is happening is ANG projects and all we will certainly consider, but besides that there are several practical issues. Some issues are arising because these are the practical difficulties the traders face in the day-to-day business. They have certain business secrecies to maintain, they have certain business exigencies to reply to or to find answers to, and that is why they have, even if they want to follow the documentation, even if they wish to comply all the aspects of the transaction in letter and spirit, but they end up missing out on certain documents, or they end up providing certain links which are so essential to claim the transaction as action, and hence we have a spate of litigation on these issues. Friends, I am aware that I am speaking before STP members who are supposed to be aware about the basics, but I do find certain fresh faces, and I expected so. So that is why I will take few minutes to prepare background, and then we will go into the aspect of the issues which are to be discussed here. Section 6(2) start with a non-obstinate clause, notwithstanding anything which is provided in section 6(1) and 6(1)(a). That means whatever is provided in section 6, which is a charging section, or section 1(a), in spite of that, the following conditions will exempt the transaction of sales which is interstate in nature, which is either occasioned the movement or has been effected by a transfer of property, transfer of document of title to the goods. Now what it says is, whatever is provided in the charging section, state the following cases, the cases which which meets the section conditions of section 6(2) will be exempted. Friends, we will also have to read section 3(a) and 3(b) of the CST Act, because exemption is provided to this CST Act
as is visualized under section 3B, the transaction which are visualized under section 3B. This second sale, the subsequent sale necessarily should be to a registered dealer. Now what is section 3B and section 6.2 reading together provides for? Now it provides for a transaction which is either occasion the interstate movement from one state to the another, or is effected by transfer of document of title to the goods while the goods are in transit, and such sale, if it is supported by documents or declarations which are prescribed by the authority from time to time, and then such transaction will be exempt. Now it talks about transfer of document of title to the goods. So we will have to understand what is document of title to the goods. Commonly we have seen the lorry receipt, the railway receipt, or the bill of lading or airway bill, etc. are considered as a document of title to the goods. The documents which proves the ownership of the goods, which allows the holder of such a document to claim delivery of the goods from the transporter, is known as a document of title to the goods. Now, such document of title to the goods should be negotiable. I have just mentioned one thing, airway bill is not a negotiable instrument. Now, whether airway bill can be endorsed or if it is not, how do you have the in-transit sale or section 6.2 sale conducted in that fashion, which is allowable under the law? We will see to that. Now, such transfer of property by endorsement has to be conducted while it is in transit, during their movement from one state to the another. So what do you mean by during the movement? It has to be endorsed during that movement. There will be some practical difficulties. There could be the requirement of passing of the Senvet credit, and hence you require to mention the name of the ultimate consumer in the LR, which allows the claimant, which allows the ultimate buyer to claim Senvet credit. His name is must as per the Senvet rules. Now that requires the mention of the name of the ultimate consumer. We have ANG's decision, etc., which talks about these having initiated the interstate movement because of a pre-existing, preconceived transaction of sale A between A and B, and the second between B and C. Now in such case there could be controversies. We will touch upon that little later. This requires exchange of forms. Friends, I am just taking you through little fast so that we can concentrate and we have more time for the issues to be considered. These are the forms which requires to be exchanged between the first seller and the buyer, the in-transit seller and the ultimate consumer, or the second buyer, as we call it, the subsequent buyer. Now, when there are when W is in Karnataka, I will not discuss and waste our time here because this is so simple. Now, this table gives what will be the rate of tax when the declaration, one of the declaration is not produced. If C is produced but E1 is not produced, or E1 is produced and C is not produced, or E2 is produced and C is not produced, or both are not produced. Now, what it says is, if the rate of tax applicable in the state, the local state, is 4%, I am just taking two simple examples, 4% and 12.5%. What will be the rate applicable in the transaction? Now, if C and E both are produced, this will be as per the original transaction. If C is received, E1 is not received, I have mentioned this thing. I will once again not take you through all this thing because this will be for your reference, because I am told that this presentation will be made available to you on the website of the association. So this is for the record that I would rather want it instead of sharing it here. What are the conditions for claiming an exemption under section 6.2? First, sale should be interstate sale. There are two elements of sale here, not elements, these are two segments of sale. First sale and the subsequent sale. The first sale has to be an interstate sale, either by 3A, that means it has occasioned the interstate movement, Or 3B, that means it is also part of in-transit sale. That could be the first sale. And the second sale is claimed as covered by sale by transfer of document of title to the goods while the goods are in transit from one state to the other state. So this is the first condition. If either of that condition is missing, the claim of section 6(2) will fail. We will come to some practical difficulties when these conditions are put to test. There has to be a movement of goods from one state to the another. Friends, what happens is, if you start the movement from, let us say, Daman, go to Vapi and come back to Daman, because these are very closely union territory and the state governments are so close to each other. You have geographical areas where to reach the other part of Daman you may have to pass through Gujarat. In that case, if it is terminating in the same state, in view of the definition and explanation provided in section 3A, this would not be termed as an interstate sale, and hence this would not be definitely qualifying for exemption under section 3B, read with section 6(2) also. The sales are to a registered dealer. Now let us say we have three parties X, Y and Z. All the three need to be registered under the Central Sales Tax Act. If either of them is not registered, the 6(2) transaction will fail. Of course, the documents C and E1 or C and E2, as the case may be, are required to be produced on demand. Now let's understand what is movement. What is understood as during the movement from one state to the other. The commencement, as per section 3B explanation, the commencement of such movement will start, it is deemed to have started. Friends, this is a deeming fiction. This will deem to start at the time of delivery of such goods to a common carrier. When the goods are handed over to the transporter, the interstate movement would commence. Why it is deemed? It is quite possible that I have handed over the goods to a transport company who does not go, let us say, to Guwahati. Nonetheless, he has booked the goods. He is now looking at other partner or other his transport company. He will help him to do the transshipment en route, etc. In that case, even if the journey has not started, it is deemed that it is started, even if the journey may start after 2 days. Today he has acknowledged by accepting the goods, giving me the LR, saying that or stating that the goods are moving from Mumbai to Guwahati. That movement has started, even if the goods have still not been loaded on the truck or the train, etc. as the case may be. Even if the train is to schedule to depart after 2 days, still it will be considered as a starting of the interstate movement. It would terminate when delivery is taken from the common carrier. Now here, what do you mean by delivery taken? The goods are to go from, say, Mumbai to Indore. This will take probably 18 hours or 24 hours to reach, depending on the load, etc. of the transport company. After the goods are reached there, in normal English, we would say the journey has ended. However, for the purposes of the Act, the journey will end when the delivery is taken from the transport company. Till such time, the interstate movement is continuing. So, during this period, from commencement to the termination, the entire journey is considered as in the course of movement. During this course, one is in a position to endorse the document of title to the goods and claim successfully the exemption under section 6(2). Now, what is document of title to the goods? Friends, the Central Sales Tax Act does not define the term document of title to the goods. However, the Sale of Goods Act, section 2(4) of this Indian Sale of Goods Act does define it. It is an inclusive definition. It starts, sale of document of title to the goods includes. That means what is mentioned in the definition is not restrictive. You can expand to include such items which are considered in the trade as document of title to the goods. What does it say? It includes a bill of lading, a dock warrant. A dock warrant is the one where with the goods are accepted after unloading at the dock, and the person who receives this at the dock, the storekeeper is known as a dock storekeeper. He issues you a acknowledgement which is known as a dock warrant. Wharfinger's receipt. The warehouse which is in the customs area, the storekeeper issues the receipt which is known as Wharfinger's receipt, or warehouse keeper's receipt. An ordinary storekeeper's receipt is also a document of transfer of the goods. It also includes multi-modal transport document. What do you mean by that? Now friends, this particular clause was not there in the original Indian Sale of Goods Act, but it was subsequently amended and included. Friends, this multi-modal transport document possibly means that it issues a LR which says that from Mumbai to let us say Bhiwandi, and Bhiwandi to say Faridabad. Now this will be routed through couple of transportation modes. It could be 2 lorries, it could be lorry and the railway receipt. That means it is from Mumbai to Chinchbandar. Chinchbandar there will be a railway receipt which will take the goods to, let us say, Delhi. Now this is known as multi-modal transport document. That is also recognized as a document of title to the goods. Railway receipt is commonly understood, friends. In past, under the Sale of Goods Act, I mean, of course I must admit, this lecture made me study once again the Sale of Goods Act. In past there has been controversy whether railway receipt is a document of title to goods or it is simple acknowledgement of receipt of the goods on board the railway. In past, Supreme Court has held that it is not, but however, because of the customs etc. and because of the change in the pattern, the business has taken place over these years. Now it is recognized as a document of title to the goods. Friends, the Supreme Court in those cases were required to consider the case of claim of transaction as sale or otherwise between the holder of the railway receipt and the buyer who was an unpaid seller. Now, in those circumstances, Supreme Court has occasion to deal with it. However, now there is no controversy. Let's be comfortable about it. The railway receipt is a document of title to the goods. Simple warrant. Warrant could be the warrant acknowledging the receipt of the goods. Order for delivery of any goods. Now, what do you mean by order for delivery of any goods? Friends, we were talking about airway bill a while ago. Airway bill is not negotiable. However, what is the way in which the goods which is represented by airway bill is delivered or handed over to the holder of such a airway bill? Let us say I want to dispatch goods from Mumbai to Delhi by air. What would I do? I will go to, let us say, Air India, book the cargo. I will have consignor STPM Mumbai, consignee All India Federation Delhi. Now, if I were to sell these goods, let's admit that STPM is the registered dealer. If I were to sell these goods in transit, since airway bill is not a negotiable instrument, I could not endorse the airway bill in favor of the ultimate customer, say the of Delhi. However, what happens is, to claim these goods, on arrival of the aircraft at Delhi airport, the holder of the airway bill will go to the airport station. At the airport station, the airline will issue you an order. That order is then taken to the storekeeper and he issues you the goods. Now, that order now represents the goods. That is a delivery order. The airline company is now issuing you an order which is a document of title to the goods because it is a delivery order. If that can be transferred and established with proper documentation, 6 sales can be made. We had a similar case in the case of B.N. Shah, where airway bill's endorsement was acknowledged by the Bombay High Court. It was a case where the airway bill was directly dispatched to a banker, and banker, on receipt of the payment of that goods, handed over the order to the buyer, and that transaction was admitted as exempt under section 6(2) of the CST Act. This is what is known as delivery order. Let's go further. And this is very important clause which makes the definition as an inclusive definition. Any other document used in the ordinary course of business as a proof of possession or control of the goods. What other documents would be there? If I say doesn't matter. If I say that the delivery order, a while ago I was discussing about the airway bill, is not a delivery order, would you recognize that transaction as an ordinary course of business as a document of title to the goods? To my mind, answer is no. You will have to classify that as a delivery order. What are the other documents which you will normally come across and term is as a document of title to the goods, which in the ordinary course of business as a proof of possession or control of goods or authorizing or purporting to authorize. We purport to authorize either by endorsement or by delivery the possessor of the document to transfer or receive goods thereby represented. That means that document either allows the holder to possess the goods or allowed to claim the delivery of the goods against that document or allows him to endorse that document in the ordinary course of business is also known as a document of title to the goods. Friends, we will touch upon this issue again when we talk about specifics of the courier receipt and the Angadiya receipt. Documents of title to the goods should be a negotiable. It should